everyone, and welcome to my best books of 2024. We're now in 2025, so it's time to talk about some of my favourite books from 2024. I've got this massive stack here, so let's just get right into it and start talking about some of my favourites. This is in no particular order whatsoever, but the first thing I am mentioning is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, because this book was incredible to read. I already knew that I liked Leigh Bardugo's work before this, because obviously I knew I really enjoyed things like Six of Crows, but I had never really read anything outside of that of Leigh Bardugo's, and this book was such a good one to go for, because this was so much fun. I loved everything to do with the murder mystery. I loved the secret societies within Yale. I loved the magic system. I loved Alex as a main character. I just generally really enjoyed this one. It is so worth the hype. I know I am very late to the hype on this one, but it was so much fun. I loved it, and now I cannot wait to continue on with this series with Hellbent, which I will hopefully do this year because it's actually on my priority list, so fingers crossed on that one. But this was so good, I loved it. I also need to mention James Tynion's World Tree here, because I knew I liked his work. Obviously I've been reading the Something is Killing the Children and the House of Slaughter series, and this was the first thing I read outside of that of his, and my god did this work. This one's hard to describe, but it's kind of like dark web, this kind of thing. It's all about murder and death and horror elements, and it was wonderfully creepy. It was unbelievably disturbing. Everything it set up was absolutely top notch. The artwork was gorgeous. I cannot show it to you though, in case any of it is triggering, because there is a lot of murder and all the rest of it in here, but it is so good. This had me on the edge of my seat the entire way through, and now I am so excited for the second volume to come out, because if this one was anything to go by, this is going to be one hell of a series. I also quickly want to mention Alligator Loki here, because this was such a cute, fun comic. This is all about Alligator Loki just causing trouble in the Marvel Universe. It was adorable, it was funny, and I just loved it. It was just pure joy to read. The only other comic I've got to mention here, or the only other two comics I should say, is Love Unlimited, Deadpool and Gwenpool. And the Deadpool one and the Gwenpool one are all talking about the different types of love. The Deadpool one was absolutely hilarious. I loved it, but the one I want to talk about most is Gwenpool, because Gwenpool's one was all about her discovering that she is asexual and aromantic and coming to that realization, and it was beautiful to read. As an asexual person myself, it was a wonderful thing to read about a character going through that experience and realising and coming to terms with their sexuality and everything else. It was absolutely gorgeously done. It was really sensitively done, and I absolutely adored it. The artwork in there is gorgeous as well. Gwenpool as a character is someone I deeply relate to on every single level, and then that just took it to the next level for me as well in terms of relating to her, and it was just gorgeous to read. I will recommend this comic until the cows come home. It was glorious and beautiful and wonderful, and I just absolutely adored it. There was no way it was not getting on this list, because while I loved the Deadpool one, and I would definitely recommend that one as well, and it definitely deserved the 5 stars it got, Gwenpool just took it for me. Gwenpool was an absolute highlight. I adored it. Next, I've also got to mention The Knife of Letting Go by Patrick Ness, because this was my first ever Patrick Ness book, and it will absolutely not be my last, because this was so well done. I love the world of this one. I love the exploration it had around toxic masculinity and unlearning that. I loved Todd's story. I loved his developing relationship with Violet and seeing the two of them try to survive. I loved everything to do with that. I loved how the noise was presented. I don't know if you can see that properly. There we go, I think you can see that now, but I loved how the noise was presented in the book, and even though a lot of things was spelt phonetically, because Todd has had no formal education, so he doesn't know how to read or write, and while that really was not fun as a dyslexic person, I still absolutely adored this book. It was an incredible read. I loved everything about it, and now I cannot wait to continue this series, which I will be doing in a possible read-along shaped thing coming in the next couple of weeks. Keep an eye out for that, because I am definitely continuing on with this series, and I cannot wait to discuss it and everything else with a group of other people. All of that will be revealed in a couple of weeks time, so like I said, watch this space. But this absolutely incredible. I loved it. I also need to mention The World We Make by N.K. Jemisin, because this is quite frankly a absolutely beautiful roundup of the Great Cities duology, which started with The City We Became. I thought this was done so well. I loved how all of the characters like weave together to become one sort of being in a lot of ways. I love the multiversal elements of it. I love this idea of anthropomorphic personifications of cities. I thought that was done really well. I love the lore around this one, and I just generally thought this was done so well. Once again, I have not gotten this out of my head, and if I didn't already think N.K. Jemisin was brilliant after the Broken Earth trilogy, this has definitely cemented her as an author who I want to read everything she has ever written and everything she is going to write as well, because this was genius and so well done. I loved it. I also need to mention Godly Heathens and Merciless Saviours by H.E. Edgman. Both of these are part of a duology, and they are about morally grey teenagers who are essentially the reincarnations of gods from another universe, trying to kill each other and trying to get home again, and it is so well done. I loved the writing style of this, I love the characters of this, and I love the fact that when I say morally grey characters, I genuinely mean it. These characters were, quite frankly, morally grey to flat out evil, and they were done so well. I loved watching them kind of scheme against each other. I loved watching them, like, the world build out around them. I loved everything to do with that. I loved the world that they came from as well when that was explored in Merciless Saviours. I loved everything to do with this. It was just absolutely genius, and I cannot wait to see what else H.E. Edgman is going to come out with, because if this is anything to go by, they are definitely going to be an author to watch for me, because this was so much fun to read. And now we're getting into my top 5-star reads of the year, and the first one I need to mention is What If Scarlet Witch and Spider-Man Were Siblings by Shauna Maguire. And this one is a what if book which takes classic Marvel tales and asks the question, what if one thing changed? And this one, it was the idea that Wanda Maximoff was picked up as a baby by Peter Parker's parents. They brought her back to New York and they raised her alongside Peter Parker, or at least Aunt May did. And it was so much fun, because this is literally Wanda being raised in New York alongside Peter Parker. Both of them see each other as basically twins, because they are the same age and they were raised in the same house by the same parents or by the same aunt. And what happens when both of them start getting their powers and things start going a little bit wrong, and then Wanda is starting to be accused of murder. And this was, oh my god, this was absolute perfection in my mind, because once again, Shauna Maguire is an absolute genius writer. I adore her writing anyway, and this was no exception, because she nailed Peter and Wanda's characters. She also nailed Doctor Strange's character as well, because he was a main part of this. I loved seeing them interact as well with obviously the mutants. There was mention of things like Daredevil. I love seeing as well the whole idea that maybe Wanda is a mutant, and that suspicion around her, because mutants are obviously still seen as very untrustworthy people, and they are very much sort of looked down upon in society. So I love how that was woven in. I loved as well that Shauna Maguire had definitely done a lot of research into Roma people and working that into Wanda's story, because she is of Roma descent as well in the comics. It is unfortunately not part of the MCU, but it is very much a part of the comics, and I felt like that was done very sensitively. I cannot speak to how well the representation was done, because I am not Roma myself, but for me it seemed quite sort of sensitively done and quite well done in that sense. I loved also seeing Wanda trying to be a superhero and seeing how people view her and how perceptions of her can be negatively influenced, all of this kind of thing. Her dynamics between her and Peter were also absolutely gorgeous. I love the fact that America Chavez was the watcher for this one as well, and she was watching all of this unfold, and seeing her deal with this was absolutely gorgeous. I just love this book. I absolutely love this book. It was the final book I read this year, or in 2024 I should say, and it was absolutely absolute perfection. I loved it. It was so good. I could talk about it all day, but just know it was a 5-star read. It was the last book I read of the year and I adored it. Then also I have to mention Now Conjurers by Freddie Kolsch, because this book was an incredible read for me. This book is following a coven of queer goth witches in the 90s trying to discover what happened to one of their own when they wind up dead, and I loved this so much. I loved the flashbacks to what happened before the death and then what's happening afterwards as they're investigating it and trying to figure out what happened. I love the demonic elements of this. I love the magic elements of this. I love just generally the lore of this. The characters were also incredible to read about. The 90s queer goth vibe was also something I definitely vibed with as well, because I love everything goth and 90s and witchy and everything else. I was reading this, by the way, just after watching Agatha All Along, so that definitely helped, and this was just generally so good. If you love queer goth witches and you want more demonic stuff in your life and all of this kind of thing, this is definitely one to go for. It is so good. I know I've said that about everything that I've mentioned here, but it is a favourites list, so I am going to repeat myself a little bit here. I apologise, but this was so good, and if this is Freddie Kolsch's first book, I cannot wait to see what else she's going to do, because this was an incredible book and I cannot wait to see what else she's going to do, because I had so much fun with this. Then I have to mention The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. This is my first T. Kingfisher book. It will not be my last, because this was such a creepy, atmospheric vibe I could not get over. This is kind of a horror portal fantasy type thing, and the only other thing I will say is that there are creatures in here and writing on the wall that says pray that they are hungry, and that is all I'm going to say, because I feel like it's best to go into this book without any knowledge further than that. I feel like it works best that way, and this was so much fun. That is all I would say, is that this was so creepy and atmospheric. I did not want to put it down. It was haunting my thoughts when I wasn't reading it. It was all I wanted to think about. I sped through it in like 2 days, and even afterwards I was still thinking about it afterwards, because I was just constantly thinking about that portal world and that pray that they are hungry and what happened throughout this book, and it was just so good. I cannot wait to see what else T. Kingfisher does, because if this is anything to go by, they are going to be one hell of an author for me as well. And then quickly, before we go into my top 3 books of the year, I have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and as you can tell, I am not usually a contemporary reader. I am definitely more of a sci-fi, fantasy, horror type reader, but this book, it got its claws in me and would not let me go. From the first page onwards, I just could not put this down, because I was obsessed with this book, because this is a deep dive into the world of like the publishing industry. It's also a conversation about white privilege and racism and things like this, and microaggressions and all of this kind of thing. And it was an absolutely incredible deep dive into all of those things, and seeing how our main character is making these mistakes, not seeing that she is being racist, that she's weaponizing her white privilege, the fact that she is hiding her white privilege as well and pretending to be a race that she is not. Just seeing her do all of these types of things, and seeing her dig the hole further and further and further and further, and make more and more and more and more mistakes without making any kind of like realization that she is in the wrong and that she is doing terrible things here, was incredible to read. I literally could not put this down whatsoever. It was just in my, like, it was just constantly in my psyche, and I could not stop thinking about this book when I wasn't reading it. It was another one of those, I could just was absolutely obsessed with it as I was reading it. The way that this was constructed was just incredible. I've got no words to articulate how good this book was, to be honest. There are no words to articulate it, because it was just so well done, so engrossing. It was incredible. That's all I've got. It was incredible to read. And then as for my top 3 books of the year, the first one is Keedy by Elle McNichol, because this book, once again, is Elle McNichol. I absolutely adore Elle McNichol's books. We know this about me. I adore her work, and this was no exception. This is the prequel to A Kind of Spark. This time we are following Keedy, who is trying to deal with the bullying problem within her school, and it was absolutely beautifully done. It was so wonderfully written, so sensitively written, so relatably written as well. As an autistic person myself, I found that absolutely beautiful to read, and once again, Elle McNichol made me tear up at the end. I don't know how she does this, because usually this doesn't happen to me, but Elle McNichol in nearly every single one of her books has made me want to cry at the end of it, and this was absolutely no exception. I love this book so much. I know I am biased because I'm a big Elle McNichol fan anyway, but this was gorgeous to read. I loved it. And then my final top 2 absolute favourite books of the year were both Skullduggery Pleasant books. The first one I'm going to mention is The Haunted House on Hollow Hill, which came out second, and then the second one I'm mentioning, which came out first, is The Mind Full of Murder. So with Haunted House on Hollow Hill, this was a short novella. It was originally a audio drama that came out in half-an-hour chunks that was released over the course of 6 weeks, and it's following Skullduggery and Valkyrie as they are trapped in a haunted hotel. The ghost is out and is feeling vengeful, and there are also 2 serial killers running around as well. And Skullduggery and Valkyrie need to find the serial killers, figure out how to calm down the ghost, and try and stop everybody else from dying and stop themselves from dying at the same time. This was so much fun to read. I loved listening to the audio drama as well, and trying to figure out who was actually behind the killings, who was actually the serial killers, why they were motivated to kill the people that they did, all of this kind of thing. And then the book itself was also really good fun to read. I especially loved the "there's a skeleton inside you" conversation that had me absolute rolling on the floor when I was reading it and listening to it. I thought it was absolutely hilarious, and it was once again Derek Landy firing on all cylinders. I loved this one. And then Mind Full of Murder is absolutely no different. This book is following the idea that a bunch of humans who are not connected in any way, shape or form, they're not even sorcerers, are being killed by magical means, and Skullduggery and Valkyrie are trying to find out why, and it is so much fun. Once again, I loved everything to do with the murder mystery. I love the fact that it was very much sort of built like a slasher, like your classic horror slasher, which I thought was absolutely brilliant because I am such a fan of slashers. It was filled with horror references, so you had at one point someone's ringtone was the Halloween theme tune. There was another point where they got to a cabin in the woods, which is obviously a major horror trope, and then Skullduggery sat all of the remaining people down and went, "What's your favourite scary movie?" which is obviously Ghostface Killer from Scream, so that was fantastic. There was probably a whole ton of other horror references that went completely over my head, but there was so many in there. You could tell that Derek Landy was having a fantastic time writing this book, and you could tell that he is a major horror fan, and it was just so much fun. I had the greatest time reading this book and this book. They were both so much fun. I loved everything to do with them, and I gave both of them 5 stars, and they are absolutely the standout books of the year for me. And that is the end of my best books of 2024. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up. Comment down below, tell me your favourite book of 2024. I'd love to know. Or if you don't have that much time, leave me a book stack emoji down below to let me know that you were here. I'll also leave a link as well down below to all of my social media if you want to check it out, including to the Comic Book Sanctum, which is my website dedicated to Marvel Comics, which has got everything you could possibly need to know about Marvel on there if you are interested in learning more about Marvel Comics and reading orders and characters and all of that good stuff. Or if you just want to see any more of my videos, please click subscribe here, and over here will be the link to my previous video. Until next time everyone, bye!